The movie begins with Bob Parr overhearing a police chase over a police radio. Activating his map, he heads towards the car chase while the car's mechanism trades in his fancy tuxedo for a superhero suit. Bob, now Mr. Incredible, speeds in his car to catch the criminals, stopping on his way to free an old lady's cat from a tree. Just as he is about to leave, he hears about a robbery in progress. He then notices Buddy, a fanboy of his dressed in a homemade superhero outfit, in his car, wanting to be Mr. Incredible's sidekick and calling himself Incrediboy. Mr. Incredible ejects him out of the car, rejecting this partnership, and speeds away. On a rooftop, Mr. Incredible catches up to the robber, intimidating him, but before he can take him down, Elastigirl appears and knocks him out. Playfully arguing, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl flirt with each other before she heads off. Just when this last crime is wrapped up though, Frozone appears, a superhero friend of Mr. Incredible, sliding through the ice in the background and warns Mr. Incredible about being late for a special event. But Bob says he has time. Just then, he sees someone attempting to jump off of a building. Mr. Incredible jumps to action, catching him mid-fall and crashing through a window into a building, saving his life. Just then, a supervillain known as Bon Voyage blows up a wall and appears in front of Mr. Incredible. Just when he's about to stop him, Incrediboy shows up again with rocket boots. Mr. Incredible keeps trying to tell them to go home and that he works better alone. But Incrediboy promises to be useful. While Incrediboy tries to go to the police, Bon Voyage attaches a bomb to his cape. And Mr. Incredible chases after him, grabbing Incrediboy's cape as he tries to fly using his rocket boots. He eventually gets the bomb off of Incrediboy, but it ends up blowing a rail bridge. Mr. Incredible barely saves an oncoming train from going off the rails. Mr. Incredible drives off, leaving it to the cops to handle the scene. Heading into a church, back to his tuxedo and removing his mask, Bob Parr enters to approach Helen, the secret identity of Elastigirl, as a priest reads their vows and they get married, with Frozone and all of their friends in attendance. Soon after, though, the man Mr. Incredible saved from jumping off the bridge sues him for saving him when he didn't want to be saved, leading to a string of large superhero lawsuits and ultimately a ban on superheroes. The government initiates the superhero relocation program in order to help them settle into their normal lives. Years later, Mr. Incredible, now known as only Bob, works in an insurance firm. He tries to help his clients even when his boss is constantly reprimanding him. While Bob is at work, Helen with baby Jack goes to their son Dash's school, where he had gotten into trouble for mocking his teacher, although no one has any proof as he uses his super speed to do it. In the car, Helen and Dash argue about how they're not allowed to use their powers. Meanwhile, at another school, Dash's sister Violet notices Tony, a boy she has a crush on, walking out of the school building. He almost catches her staring at him, but she uses her invisibility powers to remain unnoticed. Soon after, Helen and Dash arrive to pick her up. Later in the day, Bob gets back home frustrated and depressed by his job. In his frustration, he crushes the car's frame using his super strength unintentionally. He angrily picks up his car when he sees a little boy looking at him. He quickly puts down the car and walks inside. Later at dinner, Bob seems distant and unfocused when Helen tells him about Dash getting in trouble again. He absentmindedly helps Dash cut his steak, but gets excited when he finds out Dash used his powers to do it. Helen reminds him that he shouldn't be encouraging this kind of behavior, but in his excitement, Bob breaks Dash's plate and goes to get a new one. In the meantime, Dash teases Violet about her crush on Tony and the two start fighting. Dash uses his speed, and Violet her force fields to fight with each other. Helen uses her stretching powers to hold them back, but they keep fighting regardless. When Bob comes back, he's forced to intervene, but they all straighten up as soon as they hear the doorbell. Jack opens the door and Lucius, Frozone as a civilian, walks in and greets them and leaves with Bob for, quote, bowling night. Bob and Lucius sit in a car in an alleyway listening to the police radio for potential crimes that they can chase. Lucius doesn't want to save people undercover at the risk of getting caught, but Bob pressures him into it. When they hear of a building catching fire, Lucius reluctantly drives off to the location, while a mysterious woman follows them from a distance. Wearing ski masks to hide their faces, Bob and Lucius save a group of people from burning building by crashing through a wall right before it collapses. They crash into a jewelry store and the police try to arrest them, thinking they're thieves, but Frozone freezes the cop holding them at gunpoint and they manage to escape. Helen catches Bob when he gets back home, and they have an argument where Helen tells him that he needs to stop putting their family at risk of being uprooted. The next day, Bob's boss calls him into his office where he scolds Bob for granting too many claims. Their argument heats up so much that Bob unintentionally sends his boss flying through multiple walls. He ultimately ends up getting fired from the job. Back home later that day, Bob finds a tablet at his work briefcase, secretly placed there by Mirage, the woman who had been tracking him and Lucius. The tablet plays a video of her offering him a job that would require him to take down a killer robot on a far-off island. He's given a day to respond to the offer. Bob decides he'll take the offer and lies to Helen, telling her that he's going on a work trip for a few days. On a jet, Mirage updates Mr. Incredible on his task. He is to take down the robot, shutting it down without destroying it. She instructs him to do it quickly as it can learn the movements and attacks of anyone who fights it. Mr. Incredible lands on the island wearing his old suit. He fights the robot, eventually climbing inside it so the robot attacks itself to get to him, and destroying itself in the process. A mysterious boss tells Mirage to invite Mr. Incredible to dinner, which Bob agrees to attend. When Bob returns home from his superhero job, he seems refreshed, being more present with his family, working out and getting back into shape, and even getting a new car. Bob notices a tear in his supersuit, so he decides to visit an old friend and specialist designer, Edna Mode, to fix his suit. She fixes the suit and also makes a new one for him that he decides to wear for his next trip. There, Mr. Incredible is ambushed by another killer robot and a grown-up Incrediboy, who now is known as Syndrome. Intent on taking revenge, Syndrome forces him off of a cliff edge and throws an explosive down with him. Mr. Incredible barely manages to survive by hiding the skeleton of Gazerbeam, a superhero killed by Syndrome. The scanning device fails to pick up his vitals, making Syndrome believe he is dead. Looking around the cavern he finds himself in, Mr. Incredible notices the word Kronos etched into the wall. Bob sneaks into Syndrome's facility and discovers his plan to release a killer robot in the city and pretend to stop it to make himself a superhero. Meanwhile, Edna invites Helen to her house and shows her suit matches Mr. Incredible's new suit for the whole family. Helen says that they're all retired, but when Edna pushes her to, she calls Bob's office. She discovers that he was fired and is not on any work trip. Edna activates the GPS device installed in Bob's suit. This shows Helen Mr. Incredible's location, but also gives away his location to Syndrome security, leading to his getting caught. Encouraged by Edna, Helen leaves for the island where Bob is being held, taking the supersuits with her. Commandeering a plane and heading to the destination, she finds out that Dash and Violet also sneaked onto the plane with her without her knowledge. Worried, she asks where the baby is, but they reassure her they have left Jack with a babysitter. Approaching the island, Syndrome's missiles destroy Helen's plane. Regardless, Helen, Dash, and Violet jump off at the last second, landing in the sea and getting to the island. There, Helen leaves the kids hidden in the cave while she goes looking for Bob. Mr. Incredible threatens Mirage's life for Syndrome to let him go, but Syndrome is willing to let her die. Mirage has a change of heart due to this, planning to betray Syndrome as she realizes he's wrong. While Helen fights her way through the facility looking for Bob, Mirage secretly frees him and tells him that his family is alive on the island. At the same time, Helen finds them. Reunited, they both immediately run off to save their kids as they have set off alarms and are being chased. Once they're all together, they fight off Syndrome's forces and are almost free when Syndrome catches and imprisons them again. While in captivity, Bob apologizes to his family for putting their lives in danger and ignoring them. At the last minute, Violet uses her force field powers and manages to free herself and her family. With very little time left until Syndrome's robot is released onto the city, the Incredibles board a rocket and launch it towards the city to get there as soon as possible. They then hijack a car and land in a parking spot just in time to see the robot rampaging. Syndrome tries to follow his plan and pretends to stop the robot while secretly using his remote to do it. However, the robot knocks the remote out of his hand and goes out of control. The Incredibles are joined by Frozone and barely stop the robot from causing more damage. Just then, Bob remembers how the one he defeated could only be damaged by its metal arms. He uses one dislodged arm with Helen's help boosting it into the robot, shutting it down, and denying Syndrome his spotlight. The people of the streets cheer on the Incredibles and Frozone just like they used to before the ban of superheroes. When they get home, the Incredibles find Syndrome has kidnapped Jack-Jack. He overpowers the family and tries to fly away, but Jack-Jack suddenly develops powers, turning into a red and fiery superhero. He frees himself while Syndrome gets sucked into his own jet turbine. As Syndrome's jet explodes, it falls directly over their house and explodes. Violet casts a large force field around the whole family and saves their lives. Sometime later, Dash is allowed to participate in competitive sports where he uses his powers to stay in the competition but doesn't completely rely on them. The movie ends with them walking towards their car after Dash's marathon when a large mining drill erupts from under the city. On top of it stands a new supervillain, calling himself the Underminer. The family puts on their masks and prepares to save the world once again. The end. Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos and make sure to subscribe and tap that bell icon to be notified about our latest videos. We'll see you next time.